Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, as always told, How to Voice Radio. So today, we are taking a good look at one of the more exciting new GXs from the recent Burning Shadows expansion. It's Golisopod, a GX that personally I'm quite a big fan of. Now, being a grass type means you're not hitting much for weakness. You'll get the occasional Lapras deck and the occasional Lycanroc deck, but weakness is not going to be a huge factor for you hitting. Unfortunately, for being hit, you are at a big risk from decks like Volcanion, Turtonator, etc., which is a little bit annoying, but hey-ho, these things happen. Now, Golisopod, 210 HP is fairly standard. Retreat of 3 is very high, but as we're going to see in a minute, you're going to play so many switching cards, it's not going to matter. But it's the attacks here we're really keen on. And primarily, it's the first attack, First Impression. 30 damage, but if you were on the bench and became active this turn, you do 120. Now, the translation here is really important. Initially, we thought it was if it became active this turn, in which case you could evolve an active Wimpod and do 120. But because Golisopod has to be on the bench and come active, if you evolve an active Wimpod, you don't do 120. You've got to evolve it on the bench and then get into the active. And honestly, I've been playing a bit of this on my stream at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio lately. Next stream on Sunday. And honestly, it's a real pain trying to get your head around getting it in the active every turn. Now, if you add, and that's just for one energy, which is awesome, but if you do add a double colorless energy, you can do armor press, do 100, and then you take 20 less the following turn, which is alright. And crossing cut, which does 150 and switches to the bench. Now, that's actually quite a good GX attack, but only if you put a choice band on there. Once you put a choice band, you hit for 150, and something like Tapu Bulu or something like Drampa will be KO'd, and you get to switch to the bench at the same time, which is frankly awesome. Its first impression we're largely worried about here, but the other two attacks can be fairly useful. And as a side note here, you want the Burning Shadows Wimpod. I know the Guardian's Rising Wimpod looks like it's got a useful attack in Scamper Away. If you're using Scamper Away, something's gone wrong. You want the Burning Shadows Wimpod, because on the first turn of the game, it's got free retreat, which means if you go second and you've got Forest of Giant Plants, then you can evolve a benched Wimpod into a Golisopod, and then you've got a free retreater in the active. Both the Wimpod are fairly similar, they've both got 70 HP, but really here, we want this Wimpod because the turn 1 retreat is awesome. Really, really useful. Even if you just retreat into a Tapu Lele, attach a double colorless and hit, it still means you're doing something on turn 1. You want this Wimpod. Now, there are a plethora of other options that we've got for Golisopod, but before we get to that, we need ways to switch in. Because really, the way this Golisopod wins, most of the time, is just hitting for 120 every turn. 120, 120, 120, 120. And hopefully, you hit for 120 so many times that your opponent just buckles under the pressure. You go ahead by a couple of prizes, and then you're hitting 120 while having 210 HP, and you win. So, how do you switch? Well, having a free retreater is going to be really useful. Something like Tapu Koko, or another free retreater. You can switch into that Tapu Koko, or Escape Rope into that Tapu Koko, or Guzma into that Tapu Koko, or put that Tapu Koko up when something gets KO'd. Do you see where I'm going with this, ladies and gentlemen? Either way, you get to just switch into him. And here's something else that's good about Tapu Koko. And then, of course, you can just free retreat into Golisopod. One of the issues with Golisopod is that you're kind of maxing out at 180 here. And that's not always enough for things like Turtonator. So if you can have a turn or two using this Tapu Koko, you should be looking pretty good in the early game. And then in the late game, you can just come and sweep with Golisopod. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You're playing double colorless energy anyway, probably. And you should have a bunch of free retreaters like Wimpod and a load of Floatstone. So you should be able to get this going turn 1 if you want it. You should be playing a whole bunch of Floatstone. In my list at the moment, I'm just playing 4, so anything can get out the active. You've got Switch, you've got Escape Rope, you've got Guzma, you've got Ace Roller if something gets hit but not KO'd, which is kind of useful, and especially with Forest of Giant Plants, or if you've just got another Wimpod on the bench, you pick up Golisopod, evolve the benched Wimpod, bench the other Wimpod, attach the energy, and in this way you can just go. Do remember though that you cannot promote the Wimpod and evolve, you need to evolve while it's on the bench, and then get it in the active, which is why having something like a Tapu Koko to stick active is so gosh darned useful. The other option that I adore, and I'm playing a 2-2 line in my Golisopod list at the moment, is Zoroark. Zoroark, ladies and gentlemen, is amazing. There's so many good things. Firstly, it's got a decent attack for a double colourless energy. Secondly, it's got the stand-in ability. So you whack a Floatstone on Zoroark, and you can always just recover your Golisopod and hit for 120 every single turn. It's super useful, ladies and gentlemen. It's really handy. I'm a big fan of Zoroark in this deck. You can play Rainbow Energy and the Break, but honestly, I can't find room for it, and I don't think you'll be able to either. So I said about this plethora of other options that Golisopod has. Let's run through some of them, and I'll tell you which ones I like. Firstly, you can just go full Zoroark. You can play a 2-2 to 4-4 line of Zoroark. It works as an alternate attacker. It works as a switching in option. It really is super useful. And there's plenty of decks that really want to have a full bench. And if they've got a full bench, you're hitting 160, 190 with a choice band, which means that even if you don't use Zoroark, just having a Zoroark on your bench means that your opponent is going to limit their bench, and that's going to help you throughout the game. Again, you can go for the Break and Rainbow Energy, but I'm not a fan at all. The promo Lurantis is something you can experiment with here, just to allow you to do a whole bunch of extra damage. Now, this does mean that you are susceptible to plays like Hex Maniac or Garbodor that turn off your abilities, but in theory here, if you were to play a build that had no Zoroark but had, say, 4 choice band and a 3-3 Lurantis line, you could often be hitting something like 190 with the first attack. Now, this is a build I haven't tested very much at the moment, and I worry that you don't have a backup attacker, and that makes me a little bit scared. But what you could do here is just go full bore with a heavy Lurantis line, Golisopod and choice band, and then you'd just be playing no double colourless energy, just a bunch of grass energy, and the aim would be using first impression here, but trying to use first impression for 170 or 190 a turn, but you'd be giving up all your backup attackers. You've only got this until the rotation happens, but you can use the Eevees from Ancient Origins. Now, Jolteon isn't doing very much for you at the moment. We really don't have much in the format relevant that's Lightning Week. But your Flareon here turns all your Golisopod and your Zoroark into fire types, and that means that you're hitting for weakness against stuff like Metagross, which is important at the moment, and Decidueye, which is important at the moment. Vaporeon means that all of your stage 1s become water type, and that's super important for taking down things like Volcanion and Turtonator. So I am a big fan of the Eevees. Remember, they're only around until the rotation happens. And speaking of the rotation, do remember that Forest of Giant Plants is amazing, but it's going away with the rotation. That's certainly going to hurt the Lurantis build, but it's also just generally going to hurt Golisopod. Having that option to go second and get a turn 1 Golisopod is so strong. And I know that you can use Tapu Lele to search out a Wally, but then you're not drawing any cards, and we've got no shame in after rotation to draw extra cards. So you can get a turn 1 Golisopod, but you've got to have a free retreater ready, and a Wimpod, and a Tapu Lele or Wally, and the energy in order to hit the turn 1 with Wally, and a lot of the time I don't think you're going to have it. So do remember the Eevees, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think Jolteon's very good, but I did play on my stream, twitch.tv/PTCGRadio, just last night against a viewer playing Volcanion Turtonator, and because I was able to get Vaporeon out, although my opponent did have some bad draws because they relied on Kiawe, but I still, because I had Vaporeon out, I could get big KOs, and it really swung the matchup in my favour. The other option you've got is Golisopod. Now this, you're going to have to be playing a double colourless build, so something like with Zoroark anyway, but for a grass double colourless Resolute Claws. Now you've got 130 HP, but with the ability it's basically 160. And here you're hitting 150 to GXs and EXs. With a choice band, that's 180, and this is a an absolutely superb way to go about doing things. It's really good for taking KOs without exposing a 2-prize Pokemon, and it just does a lot of damage. And it can often take a hit as well. Something like a Metagross won't get a KO on Golisopod while you're sitting there doing 150 to 180. It can get a one-hit KO on a Tapu Lele. It can get a one-hit KO on a Tapu Koko GX, a Tapu Bulu GX. It really is an awful lot of fun. So, we've got a lot of options here, and the options essentially are: you go for Eevees to hit for weakness, you go for Zoroark to have a good second attacker, or you go for Lurantis to do extra damage. Honestly, my preferred build at the moment is with Zoroark, although I do play a 1-1 Vaporeon line, 1 Eevee, 1 Vaporeon, and I'm considering putting 1 Flareon into the list as well. I'm also a big fan of playing Shaman as well, and I don't like Shaman in a lot of decks, but in this deck specifically, you often need to draw cards to get your Golisopod set up early. Shaman helps you with that. But one build I really think is worth a closer look is the Lurantis build. Because if you can be hitting 190, 170 with your Golisopod for a single energy, do you even need a backup attacker? Now, the downside is, of course, that then if you're against something like an Alola Ninetales non-GX, that's going to really hurt. But all you need is just one Golisopod, and you can be okay with this. So, ladies and gentlemen, tell me what you think about Golisopod. I'm a fan, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Go nuts. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWossy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. And if you want a deck list, go and check out the video on demand from yesterday where I share my Golisopod deck list, or come and watch the stream on Thursday to see it in action. And if you want to support the channel, get some bonus pods, etc., check out patreon.com/PTCGRadio. The first ever bonus pod, The Origin of Wossy, is being deleted this afternoon, UK time, and there is the third bonus pod going up, so if you want all three of them, get over and check it out very soon. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.